Hi, it's Rachel from 7 and All, and in today's video I am going to be doing a retrospective, a recap of our 2023-2024 homeschool year. I'll share some of our curriculum hits and misses and just kind of talk about the big picture of the school year that was. Video that you're going to see quite a few of your YouTube homeschool mom friends making as we come into this time of year, the home stretch of the homeschool year. And you'll see the YouTubers do it, but I highly recommend that even if you're not a YouTuber and you're not here talking on videos all the time, I highly recommend that you do this for yourself in some way, that you do look back on the homeschool year that might be winding up for you, or however you arrange your homeschool years. Look back on what this year has been and do a little bit of taking stock. How did it go? What did you learn about yourself as a teacher? What did you learn about your students? How can you push forward? How can you move forward? And in what areas would you like to see your homeschool grow? And in what areas do you think that you're doing really, really well right now? So I know that not everyone is out here making videos like this, but I highly recommend that you still do this in some way. And maybe sit down with your planner or with your journal and reflect on the high points, the low points, what worked and what didn't, so that you can take that information that is specific to your own homeschool and take that into the next year. All right, let's get started with my school year that was. I don't actually have a very firm beginning and firm end to the school year, as you do know if you already watched this channel. So it all kind of cycles through, but we've definitely been moving out of what I'd planned for kindergarten and for preschool. That was the year that I'm coming out of. I had a kindergartner, I had a preschooler, and we added a new family member this year, which I'm just going to say was the highlight of the homeschool year that was for me. We grew our family, added another little boy to the mix in December. That was definitely the biggest win. I think everybody knows pregnancy is tough, and pregnancy while parenting small children and homeschooling small children is also tough. But he has just been the sweetest blessing, the greatest gift I could have imagined, the answer to so many prayers. He's an absolute delight, and it's been so fun to be homeschooling with him in my arms now. I would not say that, the actual pregnancy part was that fun. It was, physically demanding, and, a lot of stress and anxiety as well is something I do struggle with during pregnancy, but we're so glad he's here now. So grateful for that. That he gets to be in the mix now as I am continuing to homeschool my older boys. Now, as far as the actual hits and misses when it comes to curriculum this year, I'm going to be talking about that. I have shared detailed reviews about many of the things I'm going to talk about, so I will try to link to my detailed reviews in the description down below if you want specific information on one specific curriculum. But let's get started just talking about it. If you've watched this channel this year, you've known that for kindergarten, I decided to do an around the world themed kindergarten with rich literature and geography studies, and that has been really fun. We have used Beautiful Feats Around the World curriculum, part 1 and part 2. We're not 100% finished with part 2 yet, but we are winding down. We are getting close to the end. And I have shared about many of the cool things that we've done throughout this year. This has definitely been a win in the sense that we've made great memories. We've had some really cool experiences. We've eaten century eggs while studying China. We've gone to a really nice ramen restaurant while we're studying Japan. We went to IKEA and had a Swedish tea time. We've enjoyed many of the books. Some of the books in here, as soon as I finish reading them, my sons are saying, read it again, read it again. There are some of them I've read quite a few times at this point. But I do say that with a caveat, that with this curriculum in particular, I actually did not like it as much as I expected to. I kind of thought I was going to enjoy using this resource more than I actually did. And let me explain why. So what I have here is the guide for the Beautiful Feet books Around the World with Picture Books. And this is my first time ever using any resources from Beautiful Feet, so maybe I didn't quite know enough of what to expect. And also, this is my first time doing an around the world study, so I think also in my own mind, I needed some time to figure out what did I really want from an around the world study. But I'm going to show you one country for an example of why this maybe didn't fit what I wanted quite as well. Let's look at Holland. For Holland, the resources that you have as part of Beautiful Feet is you have the giant maps book, and then you have this one picture book, The Boy Who Held Back the Sea. The story of the little boy who puts his finger in the dike and holds back the sea from flooding his village in Holland, which is a fictional tale. Then you have some suggested books about Rembrandt and books related to tulips and windmill. Like, so you have storybooks recommended here that you can get from the library if you have one, or you can buy if you can. Then they talk about Rembrandt and Vermeer, Hieronymus Bosch, don't quite know how to say the first name. And then they talk about kingfisher birds, wild boars, and the bowhead whale. And then they have a recipe. So for me, I feel like you could go through all of that and it's still pretty hard to really feel like you learned a whole lot about the Netherlands. So I don't know if this is going to come across that clearly on video, but from teaching through this curriculum and all around the world, I was finding that to really communicate, to really feel like we actually learned a significant amount of information about a country, or we could really understood definitive things about a country, I ended up needing to add in quite a lot, I felt like, when using this curriculum. And some people, that's exactly what they want to do. They want to go and do all that research and that prep and add in a whole lot, and they thrive with that. For me, I can do it, but it's not necessarily something I appreciate in a curriculum is when it says, okay, you can go and find whatever you want to teach your kids about Holland. I can do that, but I do kind of appreciate a little bit of a different structure in a curriculum myself. That's something that I learned about myself through using this. And through using this, I think for me going forward, what I would really love to see in an around the world curriculum would be one that's probably more based on like a nonfiction text spine that had child-friendly readings that were like about the country. Let's give us some really, interesting, well-written information about what's the geography of the Netherlands like? What's the culture like? What is the food like? Multiple examples, the clothing, the history, what interesting parts has it played in the realm of world events? Can be at a kid's level. It doesn't need to be super advanced. It would need to be at a kid's level if you're trying to use it with young children. But I think that's more what I would imagine being a good fit for me, and what I would want out of an around the world curriculum is having that nonfiction spine text, and then you add on the stories and the picture books about Rembrandt and the picture books about the windmill cat and all of those. You add that to the basis of the nonfiction text. I've had a lot of people ask me if I think that the big maps book that this is based on is worthwhile, and I do think that that's a really, really cool book. It's one that I enjoy looking at. It's one that my boys enjoy looking at. I'll give you a glimpse at it here. It's really cool, and in a way, I think that is the nonfiction text spine that is trying to use. But when you're just looking at those maps and you see all the little pictures of interesting things, if you don't already have the background knowledge to teach what is this thing that there's a picture of, it can be kind of hard to use that as a core teaching tool. Of course, you can look at the little picture and go and research what that is on the internet to actually teach your children about it, but sometimes it can be hard to find very good quality, child-friendly resources to teach your children about these random little pictures that are all over the page. So I do find it to be a really cool tool, cool for looking through, and if you have a lot of background knowledge about that country, it can be easier to use it as a teaching tool, but if you don't have a lot of background knowledge about that country, it's more difficult to use that, if it makes sense. And for me, having a teaching text that had more words to me would be a little bit more useful than just having the pictures, because if you don't really know what that is or what the significance of that object is, you have to go off searching for it. So that was our experience with it. I know different people thrive with different types of curriculums. Different people are looking for different types of experiences. That's just my feedback, my experience. We had a lot of fun. I don't regret making this the choice for my oldest kindergarten year. All of these picture books are ones that I can see coming back to. Most of the picture books are ones that I can see coming back to in future years as we're studying different historical time periods. I can definitely see myself pulling in many of these titles, but I don't think I would necessarily, now that I've learned how I would want to approach world geography studies, I now know that I would take a little bit of a different approach in the future. See, we learn a lot about ourselves from actually doing the homeschooling. Next subject area, math. This was kind of a crazy year for math for us, and you might have got that impression if you've seen some of my previous videos. I am a Math with Confidence user. I've loved all the levels that we've used so far, and this was my son's kindergarten year. What I found during his kindergarten year was that he started really making some big leaps in math, and he started just really falling in love with numbers. That was not something I necessarily expected. He had always been, pretty interested in numbers, pretty good with numbers, but he started making major leaps. He started, waking up in the morning and asking me math questions, when I'm still in bed at 6 a.m. So it's been a fun year to see just his love and passion for numbers and for calculations just start to light up. He's become very, very interested in multiplication and division. He's learning very quickly, advancing quickly, but it's kind of funny with such a small child who, he's sometimes still writing 6s backwards or 3s backwards, but then he's multiplying and dividing. So figuring out how you teach those simultaneous skills of, nope, we got to make sure we're being very careful to write our numbers in the right direction and write them neatly, but also advancing further in problem solving, teaching. That has been an interesting teaching situation this year. It's been really exciting to just see his passion growing and his skills growing in this area. It was unexpected to me. I am not a math person. I don't hate math. Math comes easily to me, but it just was never something I was super excited or passionate about. But I find myself, while I'm watching his love for numbers and his love for math, I am myself developing a greater love for and appreciation of math and the beauty that is in math myself, just through watching the way that he loves it and the way that he engages with it and the way he's constantly asking math questions just in everyday life. So I have already done a thorough review of first grade Math with Confidence that we used this year, and I've also made some videos for the second grade Math with Confidence, as well as Beast Academy 2, which we have now added into our routine to add the extra challenge that he needs. For reading, our kindergarten year was such a fun year for reading, to go from reading at a very basic level and really see his reading blossoming, see him progressing faster, getting more different phonograms. We used All About Reading Level 2 this year, and it really had a very fun variety of activities. So my son really liked all the activities where you're collecting sea animals or shells, or you're rounding up cows, or you're rescuing baby hawks and putting them back in their nest. And really all that you're doing is you're just reading words on pieces of paper. But there is definitely something about those activities that very much appealed to him. It worked really, really well. So I have a full review and my thoughts on the program there. We finished that, I think we finished that end of January, early February. And then we've just been moving into reading early reader books. Right now he's reading the Frog and Toad series to me, and it's just really fun to see how he's grown in this area and gained more confidence with being able to read text around him, reading a menu at a restaurant or reading signs on the road. It's really neat to be at that stage. Science, we used Sunlight Science K this year. It was a program I was really excited about, and we had so much fun with it. It was able to include my younger son very, very well. He loved listening to the readings, and he really loved being a part of the experiments. All of the experiments were very engaging, and we actually did pretty much all of the experiments, and they were pretty successful. They were really fun and engaging activities. What I did not expect, though, about Sunlight Science K was actually how light it felt, how little was scheduled for every day in the 5-day Sunlight Science K program. And I think that's just because Sunlight kind of has this reputation of, oh, Sunlight, it's a lot, it's a ton of reading or a ton of books. Of course, this is just their science program. I think I was expecting it to feel a little bit beefier or feel like a little bit more than it actually was. It did feel very light. My son probably would have enjoyed more science, and I did add in a few extra books, but also, as you've probably heard, this year was a bit much with my pregnancy and with it being a year of focusing on learning to read, this kind of really fundamentals year of kindergarten. So it was fine. It was definitely fine to have a light year of science. It just wasn't exactly what I was expecting, and he definitely would have been happy with more. Now for Spanish. For my older son, my focus this year was on getting him reading in Spanish. I was like, okay, Yamitas is coming out with level 2. I wanted to do that, but before we did that, I wanted him to have all the foundations so that he can start looking at Spanish words and reading them. And reading in Spanish has not come as smoothly or as easily to him as English. I think part of it is just that, he's not as fluent in Spanish as he is in English. So his brain isn't recognizing, this sounds like a word and this doesn't sound like a word. He's reading words wrong sometimes, and I'm like, well, don't you know that that's not a word? Sometimes he doesn't. So he's not able to kind of make that leap quite as well because he's not as fluent. His vocabulary level is not as high in Spanish. And also some of the words that are easy to read in Spanish are actually not very common words. That's actually something I've run into in La Patapita. I've found myself looking up words because some of these, 2-syllable, very easy words are not words that I've ever bumped into in conversational speaking Spanish, which happens in English, too, right? Pal is in all the early readers, but we don't actually say pal all that often in conversational English. So one thing I found that for Spanish, for learning to read this year, one thing that's been key has been kind of just incorporating a variety of resources for motivation. We have used this very classic primer, which just has, pages of words and short passages to read that do tend to be pretty funny with the little passages. He really likes these, the Yamitas readers, reading 1 or 2 of these in a day, building fluency with those. I have really appreciated this resource, which I'll take it out of the binder. But at the beginning of the year, I bought a whole big package of B-syllabus worksheets from Teachers Pay Teachers, and they remind me of Explode the Code, but for Spanish, simple Spanish words. And they're just different little exercises with 2-syllable words, and he's worked through them. And this is where I've really seen a big difference, that at the beginning of the year, this was not something he could do independently. He needed my help with reading the words. He needed my help with the instructions. Nowadays, I can hand him this sheet and he'll hand it back to me in a couple minutes, completely finished. So he's gotten a lot more confident, both with the type of vocabulary that they're including, the meanings, as well as how to spell the words or how to put the words together. So I've definitely seen a lot of growth with this, and I have seen definite growth. He's growing in confidence in his reading. Another resource we've been using has been the lessons that are on YouTube, that are a YouTube channel called Aprende a Leer, and I'll link to that below. That has been a great free resource to start cycling in. And I'm definitely seeing him growing in accuracy at reading the syllables, reading them in order, being able to read entire sentences. We're getting there. I think, just maybe 2 more months probably of consistent work, and I'll see his confidence really growing. It already is growing, but I think we're getting very close to that point where I'm saying, okay, he can read, and start to move on to readers that are a little more advanced than just this really simple reader. Now, as far as preschool, I had a preschooler. He turns 4 at the end of the year, so he was 3 for a good chunk of the school year, and I was doing gentle and classical preschool with him. This was my second time using this program, so you probably can tell that I like it. And also, the second round of using it, I used it much more fully and completely. Because the first time was kind of like, hey, let's try this, but I didn't really think we were going to use all of the memory cards that much or all of the elements. This year I was really like, okay, I have a lot more of the books that go with the program now. I'm printing all the cards. We're going to do the full thing completely. And we really did. It was a blast. So many happy and sweet memories. With this, it was really just about quality time, building the habit that I can learn something. I can repeat after mom. I can sit down. I can have patience with this. I can pay attention to the story and remember what I've learned. Just kind of building these very gentle habits of school. It was not about mastering letters. He wasn't ready for that. As we were going through this, towards the end, I started noticing more readiness to start progressing with alphabet and numbers. And then after my baby was born, we kind of moved up into a little bit more of a pre-K routine where we're actually working towards mastery with the alphabet sounds, mastery with learning numbers, getting the basic idea of adding, getting consistent with being able to count things very accurately. So it's been a fun year for him. One area that I do really see retrospectively as a weakness with him is I have not focused on Spanish for him almost at all this year. I think with the pregnancy, that was one of the things that definitely fell by the wayside. With my oldest, he already had enough Spanish foundation. It was easy to be handing him these worksheets or be sitting down to read the primer with him and be working on his Spanish. But for my youngest, with him just starting to develop these school habits, it kind of felt like English felt like enough for right now, and I did not focus on really growing his Spanish yet. At this point, he understands Spanish well. He doesn't tend to use it. He doesn't know the names of the letters in Spanish. He doesn't know how to count in Spanish yet. I think that was definitely one area that fell by the wayside. Speaking my second languages is something I noticed that during pregnancy I struggle with a lot more. It definitely affects what I feel. I feel like pregnancy affects my brain power, and my ability to use my other languages definitely seems to weaken during that season of life. So I think after my baby's born and I've kind of woken up a bit, I've been like, oh yes, he does need more work on his Spanish. So now I've been shifting, hey, English is strong. So let's start shifting. Let's do a little bit more of our routines in Spanish. Let's start doing some flashcard games in Spanish rather than in English. Because it is easy for me to default to teaching in English, default to playing games in English. That's obviously easy. It takes a little bit more energy to switch and do it in my second language. And that is an area where I want to be definitely more intentional in the next coming months and next coming year. Speaking of weaknesses and second languages, I would say Mandarin was also another area that I wouldn't say it was a fail, but it was an area where I could have done more, but probably I couldn't have done more. If I had done more, I would have seen more progress and I would have seen more mastery because they're learning new characters, they're learning these lessons and these phrases. But where I see them really mastering them is when I take those characters and I take those words and those phrases and I actually practice and review with them, and we do games with the flashcards and we actually use them. That's where I see them really making progress and mastery. I wasn't doing as much as, I could in a better mental state and a better energy state in as far as teaching their Mandarin. So I know we didn't see as much Mandarin progress. I'm okay with that. We homeschool from a place of reality. So it's not of, oh, if I was feeling in perfect health right now, this is what I could do. I have to be realistic. I was not feeling very good for a very large portion of our school year. So that did mean that in some of these areas that require more mental energy, I did some. We were still consistent. We still got little pieces of it done. We just didn't do the larger pieces that we would do in a different season of life. And going forward, I am going to be evaluating how I can be reviewing and incorporating our Mandarin much more consistently and working towards more progress in that in the future. Still, it's not something we need to rush into or stress about, but it's something that I now know, hey, my season's changed. I have a lot more mental energy. we can do better going forward. All right, talk to me in the comments. Let me know. How did your homeschool year go? What was your biggest curriculum hit? And what was your biggest miss? All right, I'll see you later. Bye.